A brief account of what happened on the island. One morning, uniformed men arrive at the airfield and pull boxes out of a truck. Inside the boxes are hundreds of dead mice. The cargo is loaded into the helicopter and they begin to take off above the forest, and what happens next looks more like a scene from a war film. At low altitude, almost above the treetops, the helicopter makes one circle, then another, and uniformed men drop off carcasses one by one. Each mouse has a tiny parachute. They open in mid-air, turning the fall into a smooth glide. The mice slowly land on the branches. There are only 2,000 of them. 2,000 fluffballs stuffed with a toxic chemical. The dumping of dead mice turns into a spectacle that resembles both a scientific experiment and a mad military operation. This actually happened on Guam, a tiny island in the Pacific Ocean. It was here, in 2013, that scientists airdropped 2,000 dead mice. It was a unique experiment, and if it were repeated in Florida, then, well, there are two options. Either it would solve one of the state's greatest problems, or it would lead to environmental disaster. Mouse landing. Mission Florida. Just a gentle reminder to do something below this video. So, what happened on Guam? The U.S. Department of Agriculture and the Department of Defense spent 3 years developing a strategy that sounds like the script of a science fiction movie. Dropping dead mice by parachute. Guam has become a testing ground for invasive species control. The operation's main target was the brown boiga. This snake is native to Australia, Papua, Guinea, and the Solomon Islands. However, after World War I, it accidentally arrived on Guam on military vessels. Its venom is not lethal to humans, but the consequences for the island's wildlife were catastrophic. The boigas wiped out almost all the local birds. 10 of the 12 species disappeared within a few years. And when the birds disappeared, spiders took over the island. Their numbers increased 40 times compared to neighboring areas. There are other problems too. Snakes, growing up to 3 meters, have learned to climb power poles, causing widespread power outages. Scientists estimate that approximately 3 million snakes inhabit the island. In some areas, there are as many as 5,000 snakes per square kilometer. This threatens not only the fauna, but also the tourism industry, on which 160,000 residents of Guam depend. American scientists decided to exploit the boiga's weaknesses, including its appetite. These snakes eat anything they can find, even dead prey. They are also mortally vulnerable to acetaminophen, a common painkiller known in the United States as Tylenol. While harmless to humans, it's poisonous to boigas. That's why dead mice were stuffed with the substance. In fact, attempts to stop the snake invasion had been made before. Traps were set, wardens were deployed to search for snakes. But all these measures merely curbed the population, rather than solving the problem. That's when they decided to launch a major aerial attack on the rodents, part of an $8 million program. Interestingly, back in 2013, one expert said there was no other place in the world with a snake problem like Guam. But what about Florida? We've already covered the local invaders several times, but let's briefly recap. More than 500 non-native species have been introduced to Florida, spreading across nearly 700,000 hectares and costing state residents over $500 million annually. Reptiles are a special category. There are just over 20 species in Florida, including about 6 species of snakes. Pythons and anacondas are the most commonly kept exotic pets. But they've done more than just survive in Florida. They thrive in the warm subtropical climate just as well as in their native land. Without natural enemies and with abundant prey, the snakes have created a self-sustaining population and are now displacing native species. Everything the newcomers feed on is gradually disappearing. There's another problem, too. Invasive snakes brought with them a deadly parasite endemic to their population. The parasite, Uri orientalis, is a worm-like creature related to crustaceans. It attacks the respiratory system, causing pneumonia and breathing difficulties. Invasive snakes themselves are almost unaware of it, but when the parasite encounters an animal that hasn't evolved alongside it, the consequences can be fatal. In a 4-meter-long python, Uri orientalis easily fits into the trachea without interfering with the animal's life. But for species like the pygmy rattlesnake, which is only 30 to 60 centimeters long, it is deadly. This is precisely how the resilience of the entire local fauna is undermined. According to various estimates, the Everglades alone is home to between 100,000 and 300,000 invasive snakes of a single species. If all 6 are counted, the number increases significantly. In short, the problem in Florida is obvious. There are snakes that destroy everything around them. There's the example of Guam, where a solution was found in dead mice with parachutes. Sounds perfect, right? But first, we need to understand the nuances. It's important to remember that in Guam, dead mice were airdropped, making them easier to transport, and Guam certainly doesn't have the means to airdrop live animals from a helicopter. Furthermore, the question remains, how to carefully inject the poison into a live mouse. There are no such questions regarding dead mice. At first glance, the method seems perfectly suitable for Florida. Odd pythons feed on mice and rats without any problem, especially young ones. Yes, a 4-meter adult python would rather choose a raccoon or an opossum, but at least part of the population must be affected. It all seems to add up. But there's more. Dead prey isn't suitable for all snakes. In the wild, snakes perceive food as something moving, warm, and alive, and visual, chemical, and thermal cues are essential for triggering an attack. Many snake species have organs that detect infrared radiation. Essentially, they detect heat. This is especially well developed in rattlesnakes, which can accurately strike targets even in the dark, based solely on temperature differences. These sensors function not only as prey detectors, but also as an early warning system against predators. This is where the problem lies. Even if a dead mouse is dangling right in front of a snake's face, the snake may simply ignore it. In captivity, breeders deliberately train their pets to eat dead prey, but in the wild, there's simply no one to do this. That's why, on Guam, researchers spent 3 years studying snake behavior before deciding to conduct the experiment. They found that brown boigas had no problem eating dead mice. But what about philaritic snakes? In laboratory conditions, Burmese pythons have been known to eat rats, rabbits, chickens, raccoons, and iguanas without issue. All of it was dead. But these were pythons in captivity, specifically trained to eat this diet. And in the wild, anything could end very awkwardly. Thousands of mice with parachutes will end up in the trees and on the ground, while the pythons will simply slither past. And the location conditions are also significantly different. Guam is a tiny island in the North Pacific Ocean, formerly a U.S. territory. It's located nearly 9,500 kilometers from San Francisco and more than 2,500 kilometers from Manila. Essentially, it's a chunk of volcanic rock that once rose from beneath the sea. Guam initially resembled a swampy atoll until slow deformations pushed its current topography to the surface. In short, it's a classic. As is often the case with remote islands, life arrived here by chance. Birds flew in from neighboring lands, insects arrived on the wind, and seeds were carried by storms. Plants and small animals populated Guam just like other oceanic islands. By chance. But there were no snakes. I mean, none at all. That's precisely why the appearance of the brown bogo was a disaster. Partly because brown gods spend most of the day in trees, where they hunt birds, their eggs, and small mammals. Local birds evolved without snakes and lacked any defense mechanisms. The result was predictable: mass extinction of the birds. To put this into perspective, before the Bogi invasion, 12 species of forest birds inhabited the island. Today, 10 of them are no longer present, and the remaining 2 are teetering on the brink of extinction. Their populations number no more than 200 individuals. So when the US began the dead mouse drop program, scientists were confident that only one species would respond to the bait, the invasive snake. The poison was designed to kill only this species. For Guam, this operation had virtually zero risk, but in Florida, it's a different story. Incidentally, there are 44 native snake species, and they are found in a wide variety of environments, from coastal mangroves and salt marshes to swamps and dry uplands. Many even live peacefully near humans. Because snakes in Florida aren't enemies, they're part of the ecosystem. They keep rodents in check, which destroy crops and spread diseases dangerous to humans. Non-venomous snakes eat venomous ones and help maintain balance, but venomous ones didn't just appear in the ecosystem by chance. Scientists, for example, have noted that some rattlesnakes feed on ticks. If poisoned mice are dropped over Florida, all these species will be at risk. It's impossible to target only invasive snakes with bait. The locals will definitely try it too. They, I remind you, play a vital role in the environment. They themselves become prey for birds and regulate amphibian and rodent populations. Moreover, their situation is already difficult. Many species are already suffering from habitat loss. Huge numbers of snakes are killed annually by cars or by people who kill them out of fear. On the other hand, they're under pressure from invasive pythons. And if poisonous mice were to fly in from above, it would be a blow the local populations wouldn't be able to withstand. Another unique feature of Guam is that it doesn't have many large animals. The local animals were mostly birds, bats, crabs, and monitor lizards. The imported ones included deer and pigs. So, when mice were dumped there, no one was particularly worried that some large animal would decide to feast on them. Florida is a completely different story. It boasts an incredible diversity of fauna, from the coral reefs of the Florida Keys to the cypress swamps of the Florida Panhandle. It's home to over 700 species of land animals, 200 species of freshwater fish, 1,000 species of marine animals, and 1,000 species of insects and other invertebrates. Florida is among the top 5 states with the highest number of endemic species. And among these hundreds of species live numerous predators and scavengers who are sure to be interested in a dead mouse. Foxes, opossums, bears, coyotes, lynxes, and panthers. All of them have the potential to snatch prey. To be fair, scientists considered this possibility when planning the operation in Guam. The fact is that snakes are almost exclusively sensitive to acetaminophen, a common over-the-counter painkiller. Just 80 milligrams, that's 1/6 of a tablet, is enough to kill a boiga. For animals like dogs or pigs, a lethal dose would be equivalent to about 500 mice. That is, they won't die from a single mouse. But the risks still remain. If a small animal eats not one, but several poisoned carcasses, the consequences will be unpredictable. And given the abundance of carnivores in Florida, some of the bait will almost certainly be wasted. When the mice were dropped on Guam, it was a safe bet that a significant portion would end up in snakes. In Florida, competition for prey is fierce. Then there's the question of scale. In Guam, they dropped 1,000 mice and spent $8 million. How much will they have to drop in Florida? Twice as much, 3 times as much, 10 times as much. Estimating it is nearly impossible, but it's clear the cost will also be incredibly high. And that's not all. According to the TA, eating poison mice can cause kidney and liver failure in snakes. For reptiles, death can occur within days or even weeks, meaning it's not quick and certainly not easy. Even before the Guam operation, experts emphasize that the method is extremely indiscriminate and poses a serious risk not only to snakes, but also to other predators and scavengers, as well as birds. Overall, all indications are that dropping poison mice on Florida will not produce the expected results. Even on Guam, where the program is considered successful, it has not eradicated all the snakes. From the very beginning, the US government stated that the goal was to contain the population, not eradicate it completely. And this was true for a small island with only one invasive species. In the north and south of Guam, there are thousands of hectares of forest that humans have never been able to reach. There, snake control proved impossible. So, the dead mouse operation became just one part of an ongoing war. In 2020, many years after the first drops, the U.S. Department of the Interior allocated another $3.4 million to continue the program. In short, no one had any illusions that the snakes could be eradicated. The goal was to prevent them from completely overrunning the island, and to ensure that the surviving birds could survive. In Florida, the chances of complete success are even slimmer. Firstly, there's not just one invasive species, but a whole host of them. Secondly, the sheer diversity of native animals makes the program less effective and far more dangerous. The final picture is clear, albeit rather bleak. Lots of risks, a lot of fuss, huge expenses, and yet no benefits or results. Guam and Florida are two completely different places. What works on one remote island won't necessarily work in another, far more complex and teeming region. But that doesn't mean scientists have given up. On the contrary, it's here that new ideas are being born, developed specifically for the Everglades. Take, for example, the furry swamp rabbits. Any Burman python would happily eat them, only to be disappointed because these rabbits are robots designed to lure giant snakes out of hiding. It's one of the latest ideas from the South Florida Water Management District. If successful, the robotic rabbits could reduce the python population, whose insatiable appetites are wiping out all native species. Catching a python is considered relatively easy, but the problem is finding it first. In the wild, These snakes are perfectly camouflaged, and only 1 or 3 out of 100 are ever spotted. So the researchers decided that if they could lure the invaders away with bait, they might be able to turn the tide. Innovative tools like robotic rabbits could be the breakthrough that changes the balance of power in the Everglades. This summer, 120 mechanical rabbits were introduced into the experiment. Incidentally, they tried using live animals before, but that proved too expensive, and labor-intensive robots are much simpler. They're basically a regular toy, but they've been upgraded to emit heat and move like a real rabbit. As a reminder, pythons' prey must appear alive, and these rabbits truly do. They are solar-powered and activated remotely. The robotic rabbits are placed in small enclosures monitored by video cameras. As soon as a camera detects a python approaching, a signal is sent to the contractor. The robot comes and removes the snake. Each robot costs $4,000. The project is funded by the Water District. It's too early to tell how successful the robotic rabbit project will be, but the initial results are promising. They don't require feeding or cleaning up after themselves, are waterproof, and are equipped with motion-sensing cameras. Whenever a python gets close, the system sends a signal to the researchers. Of course, it's unclear whether they'll be able to truly fool the snakes, but if they prove overly cautious, scientists have another trick, scenting the robots with real rabbit scent. This will make the rabbits look so convincing that even the wary pythons won't be able to resist. The main thing is to make sure they don't start eating these furry terminators too early. Is there something else that can help combat this invasive species? Yes, and this time, a real animal. As I just mentioned, pythons are hard to find. These water-loving reptiles blend in perfectly with wooded and swampy areas thanks to their coloring. They ambush their prey, making them masters of stealth camouflage. Furthermore, finding pythons is complicated by the vast and varied terrain, only 1% of which can be traversed by vehicle or foot. Drones with thermal imaging aren't much help either. When people used them to search for Burman pythons, the results were, shall we say, not very good. The thing is, pythons are cold-blooded animals, and the device simply doesn't detect them. See what I'm getting at? Dogs can help here. They are known for their excellent trainability, and they've already been trained to detect other animals. For example, dogs were trained to detect eastern spotted skunk, striped skunk, and black bear droppings for another program. So why not use dogs to detect invasive pythons? But it's not that simple. To begin, the program's initiators needed to survey the area to determine which dogs to select and how best to train them for this specific mission. And that's where trouble awaited. It was discovered that much of the terrain was inaccessible to dogs, as it was mostly covered by water. Dogs couldn't work in the swampy areas due to alligators, local venomous snakes, and the rugged coral limestone terrain. The team had to develop a plan to deploy the dogs safely and effectively. It was also crucial to train the animals to work in the heat and humidity of South Florida and the rugged Everglades. But it seems to have worked. Further studies have shown that dogs exhibit higher python detection rates than human search teams in controlled areas. And here's a specific example of a specific dog. The Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission recently began training Truman, a black Labrador retriever, and another dog named Eleanor to detect pythons by scent and alert handlers to the presence of snakes. The first success came in 2020, when Truman spotted a 2.4-meter-long German python in the Rocky Glades public small game hunting area in Miami-Dade County. To train the animals to reach their targets, handlers use python-scented towels and live pythons surgically implanted with tracking devices, thus training dogs to detect the snake scent. The dogs were reportedly trained for over a month before they were deployed into the wild to search. After spotting a python, the dog and handler retreat, clearing the way for biologists to pinpoint the snake's location and safely capture and remove it from the wild. The dogs were also trained to ignore distractions when working outdoors, such as other live animals. They also developed endurance so they wouldn't tire as quickly in the field. Following the training program, Truman and Eleanor now go out 5 days a week with a trainer and a biologist to search for pythons on various public lands throughout South Florida. We can only wish them luck. Robots and dogs are only part of the overall strategy. Florida has had programs in place for several years that allow for the humane killing of pythons year-round on private lands and areas under wildlife control. The annual Florida Python Challenge is also held here. Participants receive cash rewards for the most snakes caught, the longest specimen, and other categories. It's both a way to engage people in the fight and a chance to eliminate at least some of the snake invaders. But Florida's snake control program isn't limited to humans, technology, competitions, or dogs. Sometimes, other snakes are released against snakes. This spring, dozens of eastern indigo snakes were released in the Florida Panhandle. Biologists clarified that these are not new species, but native predators being returned to the wild to help eradicate invasive species and restore ecosystem balance. A total of 42 individuals, raised at the Indigo Orion Conservation Center in Lake County, have been released in North Florida. This is the 9th year of such releases, and the current release is the largest yet. Over 200 snakes have been reintroduced under the program. Some have already begun reproducing in the wild, but no one yet knows how many individuals survive long-term or how quickly their historical range can be restored. It also remains to be seen whether the program can be expanded beyond North Florida and South Alabama. Indigo snakes have been listed as endangered in the United States since 1978. Their numbers have declined due to habitat destruction. Federal agencies have been collaborating with conservation groups for nearly decades to save the species. Moreover, indigo snakes are particularly scarce in Florida. They are large, non-venomous, and venomous predators. They eat birds, small mammals, and even other snakes, including venomous ones. And in this way, they help maintain the balance of nature. For example, in this video, filmed by researchers, an indigo snake kills and eats a newborn Burman python. It poses no threat to adult pythons because it is not large enough, but it is capable of preying on young. And this is important. Killing indigo snake hatchlings can help control the population of invasive predators. The more hatchlings are killed, the fewer adults will emerge. Incidentally, robotic rabbits and the release of indigo snakes are just part of a much larger strategy. In the coming years, researchers plan to combine various tools, expand the program with dogs capable of tracking pythons by scent, and use genetic technologies to locate and reduce the population. And, of course, working with humans will play a crucial role. Education and responsible pet ownership should act as a barrier to future invasions. Overall, all these methods, robots, dogs, snake releases, show that scientists are searching for solutions and exploring a variety of approaches. But it's important to remember that the idea of airdropping something isn't science fiction. On the contrary, such operations have long been a part of everyday life in Florida. Back in 1997, more than 130,000 doses of oral rabies vaccine were distributed from helicopters and vehicles in Pinellas County from January to April. An average of 185 baits were distributed per square kilometer. To verify the results, biologists examined the teeth and bones of raccoons, opossums, feral cats, and foxes captured that same year. The biomarker tetracycline could be used to identify which animals had consumed the bait. And this practice hasn't gone away. In 2024, the USDA's Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service announced it would begin annual distribution of bait containing the Rabiral VRG vaccine. The goal is to stop raccoon rabies before it reaches Central America. The plan has been successful. In rural areas, bait is dropped from airplanes, in suburbs, helicopters are used, and in cities, it's distributed by hand or from cars. To ensure animals don't miss it, the bait is coated with a special scent mixture. Everything from vegetable fats, wax, powdered sugar, butter, green food coloring, and even marshmallow flavoring are used. This is extremely attractive to wild animals, and the bait is completely safe for people and pets. Rabies cannot be transmitted through contact with the palate. Most doses are consumed within 4 days, and almost all disappear within a week. In short, the system is simple and has been in place for years. Some states have been doing this for decades. For example, 2024 marks the 30th anniversary of the rabies vaccination program in Texas. 4 airplanes and 1 helicopter are used, making 8 to 16 flights per day at altitudes of 150 to 300 meters. Bait is dropped every 800 meters, and over 800,000 doses are distributed in a single season in Texas alone. The bait density is 25 to 27 baits per square kilometer. This experiment shows that airdrops really do work, as long as they provide protection rather than pose a risk to the ecosystem. A like from you. See you soon.